Welcome everyone to episode 5 of Robot Thought Leaders. This week, Zach and I are joined by Sam Bouchard from Robotiq. Sam is the co-founder and CEO of Robotiq. He started it about 13 years ago. Sam has seen Robotiq through two major recessions already. So he brings with him a lot of experience in how to grow a startup all the way into a very mature robotics company.
So thank you, Sam, for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for the invite. Good to see you virtually.
Yes.
Yeah, looking forward to the discussion.
Again,
yeah.
We missed you this year up in Canada. We wish we could have gotten up there to see you at the annual event, but maybe sometime soon.
Yeah, hopefully.
Cool. So without further ado, let's just jump into it. Sam, thank you for joining us today. You've had a long and illustrious career, well known. You've published books. You've been with Robotiq for 13 years. Robotiq has grown tremendously, under your supervisorship. And so I really wanted to kind of go all the way back to the beginning to ask you the first question and really find out about what motivated you to want to work in robotics, like back when you were in high school, maybe, and as a child even, like what were your interests really to drive the interest that you're, going after now?
Yeah. So I've decided to go in robotics pretty late in my school curriculum. So I was studying engineering and I had an internship at the robotics lab over a summer. And it really connected to other part of my story, which is I've done a lot of manual work as a kid, doing summer jobs and stuff like that. And I was really amazed to see how robotics could just be a better way to do things more efficiently and really embark on our mission of freeing human hands. So really, it's always been amazing to me to see those repetitive tasks being done again and again. And to me, I know that human have a lot more potential than this, and that just connected. And that was the beginning, and that's where I met my other co-founders as well, JP and Vincent.
I was going to ask,
that was really the beginning. So we were sharing offices, and we started to discuss to start the company. Mm-hmm. And the beginning was very humble. We just worked for a year without any salary, from our own money. Vincent got a job as a professor at TTS in Montreal. He's still there today. And then from the first product, first sales, a little bit of funding, local funding, angel funding from people around us. We bootstrapped it for about a decade before getting some external investors.
Very good. So, pardon me, where were you going to school at the time?
It's Laval University here in Quebec City. So under a professor called Clément Gosselin. So it was really nice. It was a great fun, just doing new robotics. There's a lot of great work being done there, and there was a lot of potential in the technologies, but also again in the people. And because the industry was not so developed, it's still not today that developed. It's still a small industry. We saw a lot of potential in both the technology and obviously the talent pool that was gravitating around the lab.
Yeah, Laval is a well-known robotics. At least it seems to be producing a lot of candidates for the robotic industry these days. So back then, was it as kind of popular for robotics as it is now, or was it kind of just starting?
Yeah, no, that lab was already well-known. And I was talking about the internship I had the first summer. The goal was to prepare some demos for visitors because there was an international conference in robotics. And I didn't realize until that event where I saw all those researchers from all around the world visiting the lab and looking at the stuff that was being done there and seeing all the interest and the questions. That's when I really realized, there might be something good here. And I didn't realize it before that visit.
Cool. And that was electrical engineering or mechanical you were doing? Or?
Yeah, it was mechanical back then. So lots of mechanical and controls work. So
cool. Yeah, and your co-founders, JPJ, for example, we've seen him perform on stage at the Ruck and how much of an entertainer he is. For those of you who didn't have the opportunity to see him, he's one of the few people that I know are truly comfortable doing a live demo. And by live demo, I don't mean just programming the robot on the fly. He's usually juggling. He's usually reciting some prose. He's kind of doing a little bit of everything. So you mentioned that you were sitting next to him. In like a similar cubicle or something, and you just kind of met him and that's how it started? Or
yeah, exactly. He was a research engineer at the lab. So he had done his master's and he had been hired by the lab to help the other students to do their projects. So that's how I met him. And he has a very interesting background where he's mixing very different influence. So he's been a world-class circus artist for several years.
Wow.
And that's why it took him a longer time to finish his mechanical engineering degrees. But for several years, he toured the world and just did. He was doing unicycle and juggling. So once in a while, he puts this all back together and entertain us, which is always great.
That's very good. Can you tell us about your other co-founder as well?
Yeah, so Vincent is a third co-founder. So he's still a shareholder in the company. He's not on the day-to-day operations, but we have a research chair with him at ETS, which is a technical university in Montreal. And he's really working on next generation technologies. So Vincent has a great background in human robot collaboration and sensor design. And so he's really kind of pushing the envelope, doing things that would be hard to do within the company because we have more deadlines. We need to ship products and bring products to market. Yeah, he's kind of on the side and has a little bit more freedom to explore new ideas, new technologies that eventually feeds within our product roadmap.
Very cool. Kind of the academia touch. You still have that connection back to academia, which fuels a lot of the research, I'm sure, for Robotiq.
Yeah.
And explains really how you're able to diversify your portfolio at Robotiq so much, you know, from humble beginnings of force torque sensors to now everything else that you carry on your line. It makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
So, very good. So what was your first business idea when you guys said, let's put this together? Was it to free your hands? Was that the first idea that you had, or what was your target when you first started?
You know, we explored very broadly back then. So back then there was the Automate show didn't exist in the US. It was the Robot and Vision show. And the year we started was probably the worst edition ever of that show because so we're in the middle of economic turmoil right now. But the last time it happened, it was the year we founded the company. So if you would visit the Robot and Vision show that year, you would see robots in crates, and companies would not even bother unwrapping them to show them at the show. It was at that level.
That was 08, 09?
Yeah, exactly. So we looked at this and we weren't sure what would come next. And so we explored many different markets. We explored underwater robots. We explored military robots. We explored other things also outside of hands because there were many different technologies, some not only hands, but also some robot architecture to do all sorts of different things. So we explored a lot and eventually circled back and came back to manufacturing with the first product, which was the three-fingered hand that had been developed for space applications, for nuclear applications. So it was a rugged robot design, but it took us a little while to find how to fit it within the manufacturing. So the first couple of years was a lot of exploration and a lot of driving around. And I tell that story in the preface of Lean Robotics. It took a while to realize that this product was not the right fit for the market.
Sure.
And also to realize that the problem we're trying to solve, there were bigger problems that we should be tackling. So even though it was a lot of work, it was also useful, and I think it's still foundational to what we do today.
Awesome. And then the next product ended up being the force torque sensor, or because I know this, I want to get into the story of you at the A3 conference and sort of the two-finger, I think the 2F85 two-finger gripper, but the force torque sensor came before that?
No, the technology came in similar times before we even started the company. There was some work being done in technology, but the first product was that three-fingered hand, and the A3 Business Forum that I missed for the first time last year for a personal commitment, and this year, unfortunately, because we cannot go. I've attended every event of A3, and I've always really liked that event. And at the very beginning, I didn't have any clue about the industry and who were the players and how this industry worked. So we really came from the technology background, and I just brought a prototype in my luggage. So GP had built that prototype. So I had my little suitcase with the hand in it.
Like
I would just open it and show it to anybody who would be willing to give me 5 minutes of attention. So that was my first A3 event. And then the second product was a simplified version. So that was the two-finger gripper, and then we did the force sensor, we did the camera, and then really diversified. And the end goal, or the phase we're in right now, is to bring this back together around applications. So that's more the what's the future is holding for Robotiq.
Yep.
Awesome.
Mm.
So in the beginning, when you were just getting started, how was the dynamic with 3 co-founders? How did you manage it? Did you all kind of feel like instinctively and find out what your roles were, or did you formalize it, from the very beginning? How did the dynamics go early on?
Yeah, well, it very naturally, I took more the commercial aspects. JP took more the product and the technical aspects. So that's kind of how we split it at the beginning. And to this day, it's still a little bit like that. I was very lucky to really find 2 co-founders with whom I get along very well. We don't always think alike, but we have the same goals. We share the same values. And I kind of realized that a few years down the road, that I was really lucky to stumble upon co-founders who really wanted to bring the company at the same place as I wanted. So it's great to have diversity and see things differently and approach problems differently. But you also need to have the same end goal and the same values, the same personal values, which is the case. So
Cool.
it worked out well.
Yeah.
Mm.
Can you talk, and Zach usually loves to ask this line of questioning, so I'm going to ask the first one and hand it off to him. But you mentioned bootstrapping it in the beginning. Zach's the money guy. So
Yeah.
You mentioned bootstrapping it. How did you manage all that stuff? You had a great idea for a product. You needed some money for some prototypes. You were throwing it all together for yourself. Were you paying your own salaries out of your own pockets? Like, how was it going?
Yep. So we bootstrap out of necessity as much as it was an objective. So we tried to raise some money at the beginning, and obviously, I mean, it was way too early, and our ideas were way too fuzzy, and we didn't know the market, we didn't know the problem we wanted to solve. So it was a little bit out of necessity that we bootstrapped at the beginning. In the end, I'm glad we could do it, because it really, we just had to focus on the product and on the problem we wanted to solve. So for the first year, we didn't pay ourselves any salary. So we just lived on some money we had saved before. So that was what happened for the first year. And then the second year, we started to do sales, and we also have the chance up here in Canada to have some fund for R&D development, so some R&D grants and things like that. So we kind of grew like this. So developing the product, increasing the sales, get a bit of funding, and so that's kind of how we did it.
Nice. And so at what point were you able to hire your first employees that were not co-founders?
I think it was after the second year. We hired another graduate from the lab, and yeah, so it was more on the product development side at the beginning.
And that was like 2011 or?
Yeah, around that. Yeah, 2010, 2011.
So you had enough sales at that point to be able to pay yourselves salary, or you were not able to pay a salary even at that point to yourselves?
No, we started paying us a salary after the first year, pretty much.
Yep.
Yeah, which was good because we were starting to have some kids as well. So
families, yeah, they're expensive.
Yeah, yeah, they eat these little monsters.
And then at what was the point of inflection for you? Like what, and I'm sure there was probably many, right? So at what point was it like, okay, this is going to be big?
As you say, it's really that flywheel that you keep pushing and that starts spinning, and there's no clear push that makes the whole difference. But definitely, I'd say the first point of inflection was the second product. So the simplified version of the gripper, combined with us starting to find the right channel to sell our products. So it was really that combination of the right product and the right channel, so we can really increase the sales.
And what was the timing of that?
I'm really bad with dates. I believe the timing must have been around 2011 or 12. So we're really lucky. Again, timing is very important, and you gotta take these opportunities when they present themselves. And there was a big distributor event in town. They were coming to a local venue, and so it was kind of an opportunity. A lot of the key partners we still have today, they all gathered in town for an industry meeting.
Really?
back then. So we invited them, and that was the beginning. We started to do business with them. And
Wow.
At AMC?
it was, well, AMC was one of them, but there were many others, distributors that we still work with today. It was an AHTD meeting that
Wow.
was in
In
town.
Quebec
So
City, they had an AHTD
yeah,
meeting.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That
So
must have
again,
been a nice AHTD meeting up there. Wow. So that, I mean, that is, I didn't know that. That's very interesting. And I'm sure that at that point, you know, it was almost like, this is just a awesome opportunity.
yeah, exactly. So timing, I would like to give myself so much credit for the success. I gotta say that obviously having a great team and the timing is very important. I mean, being at the right place at the right time, you gotta catch these opportunities and make the most out of them.
Yep. That's awesome.
Cool. Yep. So maybe we can fast forward a little bit, because one of the other things we really wanted to talk about to you today was obviously your book, because I think we've all read your book. I probably personally have recommended it to, 24 people at least.
I gave out all my books.
Reading,
I gave them out, and I even I called my dad this morning, who lives pretty close, and I was like, "Hey, like, do you have the book? I really want to show it on the podcast, just so Sam believes me." I've read it front to back 2 or 3 times, and I've handed out. I think I've been given probably 10 copies, and I don't have any more of them because I've given them all out. But and I don't read a whole lot of books. I'm definitely more of an audio book guy, but I have read that book. It is, Chris said, don't fangirl here. But it's hard not to, because it really shapes my mindset, and it helps to understand what is really needed when you go through a project like that. And it's used, those mentalities and the aspects from that book I use every single day. So, first of all, thank you. But second of all, what gave you the inspiration to do that?
Yeah, well, how? Needless to say, we've never written a book, so we're interested.
Well, thanks for the feedback and thanks for the good words. The ideas was really, I think, in my own personality, I love to learn, and I'm also a big audiobook user. I'm a heavy user of Audible. So I like to learn, and I like to share also what I learn, and I like to apply what I learn. And as the first salesperson in the company, talking to customers every day and getting asked the same questions all the time, I really realized that there was a need for that kind of information. And again, I tried to tap into everybody's brain around me, everybody's brain within the company, and put this in the book. And that was also a point where we wanted to establish ourselves as robot thought leader, cobot thought leader, and really show the big plan that we had in mind. Yes, we're building components, we're building plug and play components, but the end goal is really to simplify the deployment of the whole application. So even though we didn't have all the pieces to build the applications, we had the mindset of looking at the whole application. So that was part personal, part for the business. And what I did is I just froze 4 days a week, 4 hours a day, 4 days a week for 4 months. So 4 was the key number that summer, and just focused. And I had Kate Stern helping me. She was an editor, just challenging me, trying to make it more simple and more readable. And we launched it at our first Robotics user conference in 2017.
So did you wrote it in 2017?
Yep. Yeah. And
it was all based
4
on
hours a day.
Yep.
4 hours.
Yeah.
And it was all based on feedback that you had personally gotten, from being and talking to customers, just with so does that change your mindset? Not change your mindset. Does that give you that mindset as being a CEO of having that ground level approach? Because the knowledge that you had gained there was really because you were directly talking to customers, directly walking on their floors and understanding their challenges. And you put yourself in the shoes of, the customer and your, ground level employee potentially. Is that how you see being the right CEO? Is somebody that you have to stay in touch?
It's very important to stay in touch. It really feeds me a lot to visit factories, talk to anybody in the team, talk to customers, talk to partners, talk to you guys. At the same time, as the company evolves, also does the CEO role. So it's good to understand, but at some point you got to realize that your job is not to do everything on your own. Your job is really to share this knowledge and empower and enable So people are enabled really to take the lead on these. So I think it's good to have that understanding, but it's good to understand too that you got to empower people so they can do it. So it's that fine balance and that evolution that I personally need to do. And so does many people within the company who've been with us for a while, who are also very much in the action at the beginning, but now are evolving more into manager's role. So they got to leverage that expertise, but sometimes they have to refrain from jumping in and doing the job on themselves.
Yep.
So that's part of my learning and a lot of Robotiq old timers learning these days.
Were you a lean manufacturing, black belt or anything before you started to write and categorize those thoughts into the lean framework for lean robotics? Or, how did that kind of connection happen in the beginning?
Yeah, no, I was not a lean manufacturing expert. I still don't consider myself as a lean manufacturing expert. I'm a lean startup disciple for sure. I really like those ideas of closing the loop, getting feedback and iterating from there. And I thought too, the technology we were developing and obviously all the collaborative robot market was really into that mindset. It was not that big top-down approach and let's change the whole factory. It's more that continuous improvement, reducing the waste, etc. And also what I wanted to do is really, I didn't want to invent yet another framework so people need to learn. I really wanted to attach this to some tools that people already had it. So it kind of came to mind one day. I was doing a bike ride in the forest here in the winter, and why we combine these two ideas of lean manufacturing and robotics, which could not really happen in the past because a big industrial robot is not very lean. It's very high performance, but usually it's kind of that big thing in the middle that's very hard to iterate. It's really
it's an instrument. It does.
Yep. But the collaborative robots approach enabled lean robotics. So that's how it all came together.
Very cool. And so I think one of the most interesting parts of the book is the graphics, actually, because I think the words say a lot, of course, and they're awesome to listen to on Audible. But when you're trying to, get a fleeting salesperson's attention, sometimes you can just say, look, these graphics are very nice. And it kind of like grabs their attention and gets them hooked. So were you kind of thinking that your book was going to be very graphic? And I don't mean that in the sense of graphic, but it was going to have a lot of illustrations in it from the very beginning. Or, how did you design those kind of things? Because it's got wonderful charts and diagrams.
And did you build those?
I build the rough sketches, and that's very much how my brain works. Is I'm really thinking more geometrically than other ways. So to me, that's just how naturally I try to frame my ideas and explain my ideas. And I think many people are like me, and maybe many people in the engineering and in the sales role like to see those images. So
that's the best. I mean, the content is amazing, but I think seeing the content and then being able to visualize it in a book, it's not, not that it's not a good audio book, but it really, when you read it, it's so content heavy because you can actually see what's like going on right in front of you, and you can really absorb it. So for me, I'm definitely like a paint by numbers guy. I need to see it, out there, and that was what did it for me. That's why I love the book so much.
Yeah, great. So maybe we should revisit some infographics around the book.
I would agree. I would also like to ask you are you thinking of a series? Will there be a second book? Have you thought of anything to follow?
I think the content is still valid. What we're doing right now on our e-learning platform is really applying the concept to specific applications.
Yep.
And hopefully in 10 years, the book will be irrelevant. So if we do our job at simplifying the technology and making the technology powerful enough, hopefully that whole process that takes many, many steps today will be really compressed and simplified. So that's one of my goals, is to make my own work irrelevant in the next 10 years.
Yep.
Well, that's a great goal.
Awesome.
So let's talk about maybe like where we're at today and how things are within Robotiq. Obviously, you guys have had a lot of success, but if you could think about what do you think is, if you can think about one aspect, and that's probably a really difficult question, but what one aspect has created the success at Robotiq? If you had to pick one, and granted, I know everyone wants to go, oh, I can't pick one, but if you had to pick one.
Well, I think it's definitely the people. It's definitely the team. I mean, if you look at the company, what it is and what we invest in and what we spend our day trying to improve, it's everything we do starts with the people, and we're really lucky to have some very good key people around us, and still today from the very beginning. And if you have good people, you have good products. If you have good products, it's easier to do the sales. It's easier to build the brand. It's easier to get the partnership. And I mean, you've been around some of our team members, and you came to the user conference, and that's really what was always amazing after the Robotiq user conference, is getting that feedback on the experience that people had. And obviously, again, that experience, it comes first and foremost from the people they interact with. So
yeah. May sound cliche, but it really does feel like
it
a
is.
family.
Yeah. Yeah. So
how do you keep good people?
Yeah. Well, first of all, you got to define who you are and who you want to be, and attract the people that you want to attract the people who will fit in your culture and in the culture you want to build. That's one thing. And then the second thing, so it's really creating the right environment for these people. So understanding what drive people, and how you can align their motivation with the business needs and the business ambition. So that's really the whole idea. So
how much of your time and energy as a CEO would you say goes back into understanding the culture, keeping the people, driven and happy, and not to say keeping them retained, but really making it so that they want to stay at the company?
I'd say 50% of my time is really on people topics. So meeting one-on-ones with the executive team, communicating with the team, especially these days, communicating the strategy, keeping in touch despite distance, etc. I'd say half of my time is related to
wow.
Yeah.
I mean, I always wonder what it, I mean, it kind of becomes a little bit HR like at that point, because, and the more focused you are on, I feel like the human resource aspect as the CEO, you probably have a higher rate of retention as well.
Yeah, time is one thing, and obviously the energy you put into this. So it's like going to the gym. You can spend 2 hours at the gym and not lift anything, and you won't get any results. So it's really also the intent and the energy you put it there. And I don't pretend we're perfect. We have a lot of things that we need to improve, but at least it shows that we care, and we're really taking the actions, and not only listening, but also taking actions to always try to improve. And you'll never get to a perfect workplace. It's really, again, part of that continuous improvement, continuous learning mindset, and we can always be better. And again, if we're better on that front, we're going to be better everywhere, because everything that we do starts with the people.
Sure. So it was interesting. I'd like to hear your thoughts on your management style. And I asked that because last week when we were talking to Etienne, he mentioned that, he had a lot of growth with his management style over time, obviously, as their company is continuing to grow. And one of his core, pieces of advice or mantras was always create value for the customer. And he actually used that to drive a lot of how he even shaped the teams internally, externally, commercial, technical, all that kind of stuff. So what is your mantra when it comes to management style, and how have you grown from, the early days of Robotiq to where you are now after probably a lot of organizational shifts and restructuring?
Yeah, so it is very interesting, and that's part of my own personal journey, is that at every stage of the company, you kind of need to reinvent or learn the new CEO job.
Sure.
And at the beginning, when you're two people, it's just we got to do it, we got to make it work, and you put as many hours as you can. Then you get a small group, and it's easy. But then when things get bigger, you have more communication, and you need to really detach yourself and look further and give some perspective to people. So I don't have any mantra that stuck with me the whole way. I just think what's been common is definitely you gotta realize that the context change, and you gotta realize that your role also change, and you got to kind of requalify for the job, which is the challenge, because you don't necessarily have someone to tell you this. But to me, it's just really important to understand that the context change, and that you need to evolve if you want your company to evolve. and that's always how I've approached it. I think the bring value to the customer is definitely a key point, and I think that's part of our DNA at Robotiq as well. But what you got to realize too is how do you capture value as well, which is another challenge. So the early learning of the company was, okay, you got to create value, you got to solve a customer's problem, and then you got to tweak the business model. So not only you create value for the customer, but you also capture a fair amount of value so you can keep both sides growing at the same time. And I think that's a challenge in robotics in general, because to create value requires quite a lot of work. As you guys know, it's a lot of work to sell these things, support these things, do the engineering around them, do the support, etc. So
the training, everything around it. And one thing that's always been really amazing about the company is about Robotiq is that your content has always been so like next step. And I would say I made the joke on Alex Pare's interview that because Catherine Bernier works there now, and I made the joke that I would steal her presentations back in the 2017, and because the content was just so good that I need that now, and even later, and probably a couple of years later, I would steal Michelle's as well. So it's just you guys have always had such great content, and I think that you've always added a lot of value to the end customer. And I always wondered, you added so much value, but in some cases it was really given away for free. So how do you balance the fact of giving away a lot of value and trying to also capture revenue at the same time without sacrificing or pushing customers away?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think especially this year, it's really paying up dividends. And when we started to create all of this content, again, it was more out of necessity than out of strategy. So we didn't have any marketing money. We didn't have any resource to do trade shows and things like that. And I was coming from a different industry, which was it was a web-based business around real estate, so very competitive on the web. And when I switched to the manufacturing and to the robotics world, it was a really big open green field where the marketing was all those ideas of content marketing, and it was not there at all. So we didn't have money, we had time, we had those ideas, so we started doing it. And that's been the foundation of all of our marketing effort, is creating content that is valuable for people, which brings us some attention, brings us some good contacts, and we start building a relationship with partners, with customers like this. So it's true that it's creating a lot of value, and we don't capture it immediately. The great thing is that this year there are no face-to-face trade shows, and our digital marketing machine has been in place for so many years, and the starting point was all of that content marketing. So
you're ahead of the game.
Well, in the end, again, it was out of necessity, but this year it really paid dividends.
So one question I always ask, and Chris is always painstakingly letting me ask it, but so if we talk a little bit about metrics, one thing I find interesting is how every company looks at metrics differently. But I'm curious of what metric you have that you look at that you feel sets yourself apart from other companies, or lets you know the health of your business currently that maybe others don't look at as often. And obviously you could easily say revenue, but give me something more than that you really look to determine the health now and maybe short-term health of the company.
This is also an interesting question, and that relates to also your role as a manager and the evolution of the company, because there are some metrics. You talk about revenues. Obviously, revenues is a very important metric, and we track it like any other company. But revenue is really more an effect than a cause. It's really the result of a lot of different actions. So revenues, it comes in the end. It's very hard to influence directly, but it's very easy to measure, and obviously it's very big and bold, and everybody's watching it. So obviously we watch this one, but what's very important is to understand the whole chain of what brings revenue in the end. And then you start looking at metrics that are usually much more difficult to track. They're not built in an accounting system, but they're really the metrics that will make the difference in the future. So it's really the activities that we do, the products that you bring to market, and all of these things will eventually bring the end goal, which is to grow the revenues. So without talking about specific metrics, I think it's important to understand the type of metrics, the metrics that are very big, bold business metrics, but very hard to influence, but very easy to measure, and it's very easy to zoom there. But if you only zoom there, either you're going to be lucky and they're going to grow, or you're going to get a lot of anxiety because they won't move as fast as you want, and you cannot control them. So I'd much rather focus on the metrics that we have more influence and that are more cause to good business results in the end. And that's part also of the recent years learning, because at the beginning, the revenues was directly tied to my activities, was directly tied to me running around with my gripper suitcase and selling things.
Yeah.
But it's
number
not like
of
that
calls
anymore.
equals number of sales.
Yeah.
So you said you're a lean startup guy, you know, and that book has been circling around within my group as well lately, and I've read it. I love it. And, you know, I think if I was to take away one big thing from it, it's like, how do you make informed business decisions in a vacuum of information when you really don't have access to metrics or something like that all the time?
Yep.
So when you have an idea for a new product, how do you test the waters yourself to kind of decide if it's the right way to go? How much is intuition versus trial and error or some other metrics or something like that? How do you do that?
Yep. So that's one thing that people starting company and you realize this afterward. You might be intimidated because you say, oh, it's business and it's financing and stuff like that. But the reality is the beginning of a business, it's really more of a scientific approach of just putting down your hypothesis and trying to validate them. So you're not going after money, you're not going after customers, you're going after information. So at the beginning, it's really, okay, what are your hypotheses, and go out and validate them. And to validate them, you can do it in many different ways, by talking to people, by building prototypes, by doing proof concepts, etc. So that's really what I like about that approach. And it's still really built in how we develop products to this day. We really have that group, and their role is really to do exactly this, is to look at opportunities, put down hypotheses, but also find ways to get the real data, knowing, as you say, that we'll never get 100% certitude. It will never be 100% sure that we have the truth. So we really have to mix that data-driven approach, experimental approach, with mixing with the gut feel and the experience that we've built over the years.
The experimental method comes back to it.
Yeah, it's we didn't invent that. It's been around for a while.
Yeah, it's good. I like it. Thank you. So Zach, do you want to ask I can ask it. We usually have a question here.
Yeah.
Where we kind of, this is more of a forward-looking one, and we're thinking like a decade out. You mentioned your job or the ideal scenario would be to make, you know, lean robotics not even really a thing in the future, because we've moved so far beyond that. So in order to get to the utopian, you know, robotic powered future that we all see one of us achieving one day, what major technologies do you think we're going to need, or convergence of technologies? And we're not talking specifically here, but like more broad ideas. Where do you think the next major steps in technology are in order to get us to where we need to be?
Yeah. So I still think that the performance over cost ratio is still, we're not there yet. And so there's the two parts. So the performance, the robots in the end, they have to do the job. And right now, they're still too limited in what they can do. It's very easy to make a robot trip down and not being able to do his job anymore. Some small change in the parts, small change in the setup, small change in the environment. So we still need to work in improving the performance. And obviously, we talk a lot about the ease of use, the ease of deployment. But if we don't have the raw performance of the robot itself, it's really that ratio that's important. Not only the ease of use, but also the performance. And to do this, I still believe there's going to be some advances in hardware. I still believe there's going to be some advance in sensing and in software, and obviously putting it all together. So that's really what we want to do, is really keep building applications and combining all of these. And in terms of the cost, it's I think the cost of the hardware and software is one thing, but I still believe that the cost of deployment, the cost of the project management, the cost of engineering of deploying the system is still way too high.
Yep.
So that's the second part, is definitely we got to make things that are much more easier, much more plug and play, much more modular, configurable. So it's really these two things evolving in parallel, that at some point we're going to really reach that threshold where the robots will be powerful enough so they're going to be able to do a wide array of things in the factories, but also simple enough so a wide range of companies with limited automation expertise will be able to use them. So it's
essentially creating like flexible, or an ease of use factor that makes it so it's so simple to do changeover or to do an upstart of a brand new program. Are you saying that your theory is more that you have to make it so simple to deploy or to redeploy a system?
So that's definitely one thing. But let's say you take an extreme case where you have something that's super easy to deploy, but that in the end is making 1 parts a minute when you need to make 1 parts every 5 seconds. The ease of use will not make it. So it will make it, but for a very limited number of use cases.
Yes.
So that's why I say we really need to push in both directions, push to automate the manual task, push to automate the automation process and make it very easy to use. And again, easy to use, it's not only easy to program, it's really easy to deploy. So take that whole lean robotics process, and how can you really simplify the whole process? Not only the programming, which is definitely a big thing, because programming is not necessarily a skill set that you will find in any factories. But designing a robotic system is not necessarily a skill set that you will have neither. So you have to also simplify that part.
Do you see the future of the capabilities and the specs changing quite a bit within robots or cobots, even in terms of speed, payload, size, and even just design? Do you see that what that will look like to be quite different in 10 years?
Yeah, I think where there's going to be the biggest game is really on the sensory motor skills and making things faster there. I think the robots can go pretty fast. So they can go from point A to point B really fast, very reliably, etc. But then when you start to do the actual job, so when you start doing an insertion, for instance, it still takes a lot of time. So we really have to make that sensory motor part of the task much faster for the robot system as a whole, not only the robot. I think the robot as they are today are really powerful, but I really expect a lot of advances on the tooling,
the
on
last
the
10 centimeters, so to speak.
and really, yeah, exactly, and really that combination.
So building out the human-like aspects to the robot more.
Yeah, well, it's something that's really counterintuitive, and that we might have talked in the past, is when you visit a factory, things that are easy for humans are very difficult for robots still today.
Yes.
And that's kind of hard to understand, because this is so built into what we are doing, some little manual tasks. So taking that glass, and it's very easy for me, but it's very difficult for a machine to recognize this, go pick it, and etc. So it's really that last piece of human capability. So I think with machines in general, we've managed to really expand the human capability. So right now we're kind of doing hyper communication.
Yep.
So in the old days, we're just talking face to face. Now we can be in different places and talk. It's same thing for the computing. It's same thing for transportation. But I think when it comes to manipulation, the humans are still way superior. We don't have that hyper manipulation yet. And that's kind of one of the final frontier, I believe, one of the final capability of human that we haven't managed to make better with machines. So yes, we have excavators and things that can pick very heavy stuff, but in terms of when it comes to the manual task, humans are way superior still, and
That's a really
we still got to improve on that front.
I like it. Yeah, you're right. It's kind of one of the last big frontiers is the fine motor skills.
Yep.
Interesting.
So we have a lot of distributors that we work with at UR, and we have a lot of distributors that are listeners on the podcast. Is there anything that you see that from a distributor standpoint that's changing the game right now that you think more distributors should be looking to do?
I think we're already entering a new phase of the market. So I think 5 years ago, the customers were really the early adopters. They were really happy to pick the different things together and build the system and really tinker with this and be in front of the game. I think if we are to enter more of the mass market, we're going to need to have much more of a complete solution, and that's really the next phase that I believe, and that's where we're going in terms of products.
Yep.
And also that's I think the evolution in the mindset that I think our distributors need to do is what made them successful in the past 5 years might be slightly different to what's going to make them successful in the next phase of adoption of cobot
into the early
technology.
majority, and how those customers will need a different solution or a different way to get to that solution.
Yep.
Than what had been successful in the past few years for the people that were more maybe willing to take on more of the responsibilities in, if you look at the adoption curve within, the book Crossing the Chasm, it talks about like early adopters versus early majority and the different mindsets around those people. Is that what you're?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I'm referring to. So I believe people will be expecting more of a complete solution. And that's really the direction we're going with our product roadmap for sure. And I also believe that's where the customers are going, and that's also where a lot of distributors are already going. And those who are not going, I think will probably realize that in the next few months or few years.
Awesome.
Awesome. Yeah. We're coming up on the end of the time here, Zach. You got any final questions for Sam here?
The last one that I had was just, is there a mentor that really helped, that's been, and then you probably have a bunch of people that you've worked with, bounced ideas off of, but is there, one or two people that, you really helped you, and, how did they help you, and what's the relationship now?
Yeah, it's obviously very good to talk to people who've been there before. So other entrepreneurs who've been through what you're going through. It's very good to talk to your peers as well. I always find it very interesting to talk to other people who are kind of at the same phase or similar phase. What I realize too, that's probably one of the good things of growing up, is being a little bit more self-aware that sometimes you need some help to see clearly in your head. So that's also something that I've done recently, doing more training where I get more feedback from other people. I've also started working with a personal coach to try to understand what's happening in my mind and really improve the mindset and improve how I work. So I really encourage people to explore these ideas. It's been very, very powerful for me, and very fun as well.
Very cool. Yeah, no, I was on a call the other day with Yarrow from Right Hand, and he was talking about a conversation that you guys had just recently had as well. So, definitely you are out talking to people that are, your peers within the industry. So,
yeah, definitely.
Cool.
Well, that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure, Sam. Great insights today. So we appreciate the time. We'd probably like to have you back on in a few months. We're going to get our feet under us here. This will be our 5th episode with you. So maybe we can have you back on about 6 months time and check in then, and then we'll be able to just hit the ground running at that point.
Sounds good. And hopefully we can do a live session at this point.
Yeah, that would be cool to be able to do a live one. That would be very cool.
I'd love to come up and see you.
Yeah. So, it's really not that far for us. It's funny. I mean, if you think about it, for me, I think it's like 5 hours for me to drive to Quebec City. The last time I did drive it though, I think I crashed my car. So we're gonna maybe.
You think?
No, that was 2 times ago.
Yeah.
2 times ago. Yeah.
But you're safe now. You cannot cross the border, so that kind of solves
little black ice. Yeah, exactly. They don't let me in there anymore.
No. Yeah. And neither could I come. So, but definitely, I'm looking forward to that. And pleasure to talk to you guys. Great work with the podcast, and hopefully people find it interesting.
Awesome.
Cool. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Intro, Zach, or should we try and record one?
Let's rip it. Let's do one now too, and we'll just see what happens, and I can chop them all in.
Cool.
Well, that was really interesting. Just so much so fast, and I think he answered the questions, and it was just a lot where, there was no delays or, him extending it. It was just lots of content and lots of great questions, and in a relatively short amount of time. So that was just
Sam's a cool cat too. He takes any question in stride and always has a good answer for it. I don't think he really skirted anything. So he was completely honest with all the stuff we had for him.
I think the cool thing about him is he's constantly seeking improvement. You can just see it, right? I mean, everything he's doing is to better himself, to better his company, to better everything around him, and wants feedback, you know? I mean, even the first thing he said to us was just, thank you so much for the feedback on that. I think we might need to redo, try more with the book, because, we were, so fangirling about the book, fanboying about the book. So it's just, to me, that was the most impactful thing that I saw from it, is just his willingness to be better.
Yep. Yeah, it's going to be a good episode this week for sure with Sam Bouchard from Robotics.
Yeah, we unpacked a lot with him, talked about the bootstrapping, getting into what has created his success and what metrics he uses as his management style, and as well as where he thinks the future is going, and some tidbits he thinks that distributors of robot solutions need to be looking for and attempting to change their mindset on going forward into the future.
Yes, sir. All right. I think that was pretty good, Zach.
I think so too.
What?